In terms of the restaurant space, even before the fires, we've been hearing from restaurant owners that it's a very tough time. And the bookings in LA went down by 10%, according to OpenTable bookings last year in 2024.
That's numbers that you got from OpenTable?
Yeah. That's the numbers I got.
Yeah.
Do you guys see that in the restaurant space?
Oh,
I know you're one of the top performing restaurants, but do you hear that in the community?
absolutely. The narrative with restaurants is that it's one of the most difficult businesses to be in. And part of that is you've got rising costs of labor, rising costs of all the products that we serve, so all of our cost of goods sold, whether it's the produce company or the meat company or the dairy company, all those costs continue to increase. And there's a price sensitivity for how much you can charge for any single dish. And so there's a certain threshold. Yeah, there's a certain elasticity threshold to where, prices will keep, our costs will keep rising, but we can't increase the price. A guest will only pay so much for a certain item. And so what we have to do is focus on the overall guest experience to justify any price increases, whether that's, additional service steps or, building restaurants with more beautiful design. But all those things kind of play into our pricing strategy.
And did the inflation, the price of food going up, impact you guys significantly?
Yeah, absolutely. Your profit margins are already, what we like to say, razor thin. You've got a lot of moving parts to manage daily in order to kind of meet a bare minimum expectation of profitability. If the price of goods is too high that you start cutting the quality of the goods, it's going to impact the overall business. So there's there's so many sensitivities in our business that make it very difficult to manage.
And we're hearing some menus, some portions are shrinking. Does that happen?
I imagine that's certainly happening at most at some restaurants, I should say. It's not happening at ours. I think part of, I think that your value proposition for your menu item is very important. So whatever you're charging, people have to feel like they got their value.
And a lot of people like to get into the restaurant space, right? People want to get in, and it's a tough business.
Sure, and I mean, don't quote me on specific numbers because I'm just going to repeat what I hear, but there's a narrative that 9 out of 10 restaurants will close in their first year statistically. And I believe the reason that is so high is, one, there's an incredibly high volume of restaurants opening every year. And two, I think the majority of those new restaurants that are opened by people that have no experience in the business. To open a successful restaurant, there's no specific formula that works for every restaurant. One, you need to have a concept that you believe will resonate in the market and have differentiation from what else is in the market. I think two, especially in LA, you need to have a great chef with a great story. And people in LA love that specifically. I think you need to have really great sourcing capabilities of where you buy your products from, whether that's local farms or the right meat purveyor. But I think, especially in Los Angeles, the quality of the products you're serving is very important compared to other markets. Location is always an important factor. However, you can't really explain why some restaurants in what you'd call a bad location thrive and some restaurants in a great location don't survive. So sometimes there's an alchemy that exists that's just unexplainable with certain restaurants. And I think you need to be well capitalized. I think one of the biggest challenges with new restaurants is people think that, people don't budget for working capital, and a seasoned restaurant investor is always going to have a healthy working capital balance going into a restaurant to cover costs for the first, at a minimum, 3 months, but probably up to a year, to get through your stabilization period. And so I think a lot of these restaurants go in underfunded. They think, okay, it's going to cost me, just random number, $100,000 to open the doors. Sure, it's going to cost you $100,000 to open the doors, but restaurants aren't profitable on day one, so you need to account for those shortfalls for the first several months. And I think that's where a lot of people get shocked, is they think, okay, well, if I just put this $100,000 in, then I'm good. And the reality is they didn't think long term, and so those are the first ones to close their doors, because the second they're short, payroll, and they don't have the liquidity to do a capital contribution, well, then their business shuts down. The business is flooded with restaurants opened by people with no experience, and sometimes they're very successful, but I think the majority, unfortunately, are not.
Is there a lot of details involved in managing a restaurant? Does it take a lot of day-to-day details?
Absolutely. It's like theater. If you're the producer of a Broadway show, you've got to be there every single day to make sure all those moving parts and all those fine details are executed daily, and it's unforgiving, and you're only as good as your last service in a sense. So it takes a lot of oversight in day-to-day management, from operations, from culinary, from marketing, all the components of the business. And not to mention, it's a business that's heavily predicated, your success is heavily predicated on people. So you have human error. So you're managing human error. And Danny Meyer wrote a great book about this, but like one of the analogies is like running a restaurant is like herding kittens. And it's like the second one kitten runs away, you bring it back, the next one runs away, you got to bring it back, then the first one runs away again, and you're just doing that all day long, and it never ends. It's just herding kittens for the eternity of your restaurant. It's a funny analogy, but it's what it feels like.
How do you keep a restaurant successful for a long time? Because I understand, like a lot of places they open and they're very successful for a year or two, and then they die off, in a sense. Like,
yeah,
is that true?
I think like any service business, your commitment to the guest experience and your commitment to the employee experience is really important. So if you have a strong company culture to where your employees love coming to work 3 years, 5 years, 10 years later, that's going to translate to guest experience. Because at the end of the day, in a service business, our service is providing food and hospitality, and if we're not executing slowly over time, our business will start to fade. And so we have to constantly be committing ourselves to keeping a very strong restaurant culture to where when guests come to the restaurant, they feel as if it's got the same energy it had from day one.
So they feel the same experience as the...
Yes.
Now you've filed this petition, and you got some support, 2,000 plus, over 2,000 people have signed it, and they want to make sure the restaurants are good. In your opinion, what should LA do to help you guys out?
The simplest thing that I think Karen Bass and Governor Newsom can do is just start changing or amplifying the narrative of getting people to go out and support their small businesses. I think that's going to be very impactful. When 9/11 happened, Mayor Giuliani was very clearly telling the people of New York that we have to get back to normalcy, like go to the movies, go to have dinner, do all these things that you normally did to quickly rebuild New York. And we're in the same situation in a sense where there's this devastating fires that happened, and people are scared and nervous, and there's a lot of narrative about rebuilding, but people also need a little bit nudge to say, hey, it's okay to go out. It's okay to go to your favorite restaurant. It's okay to, it'll make you happy, but it's also good for the local economy and these small businesses.